In the quiet hours of a late summer night, somewhere along the winding roads of rural Ohio, an encrypted message was intercepted, and fragment of a larger, clandestine operation. It read, "The truth lies buried under the soil, where the family feud finally ended." If you've ever seen a case like this, leave a trace in the comments. Sometimes, one forgotten memory changes everything. This is the story of a small-town mystery that, at first glance, seemed like a tragic domestic dispute gone wrong. But beneath the surface, a complex web of secrets, covert agreements, and silent complicity lurked, waiting to be uncovered. It begins in the unassuming town of Millersville, nestled just off Route 66, not far from the old gas station where travelers once stopped for fuel and stories, now just a faded relic of a bygone era. The case centers around the Lawson family. Michael Lawson, a 45-year-old mechanic known locally for his skill with engines and his quiet demeanor, and his wife, Karen Whitmore. Lawson, a school teacher with a reputation for kindness and community involvement. To the outside world, they were pillars of Millersville, active in charity drives, hosting neighborhood BBQs, and sponsoring youth sports teams. But that veneer of normalcy was shattered on a cold October morning. What they found next changed everything. Behind the modest brick house on Maple Avenue, authorities discovered an excavation, shovels, disturbed earth, and a makeshift grave hidden beneath the overgrown vegetable garden. The body of a man, partially buried with signs of strangulation and blunt force trauma. The victim was identified as James Carter, a 52-year-old local businessman with ties to multiple small-town enterprises. The initial assumption was a heated family argument that spiraled out of control, culminating in violence. And this is where things get strange. Witnesses recall seeing Michael and Karen arguing fiercely the night before the discovery, shouting, accusations flying. But nothing out of the ordinary for a heated domestic dispute. Yet, the police found no signs of forced entry or robbery. The house was clean, nothing appeared stolen or out of place. The community whispered rumors. Was it truly just a family feud? Or was there more beneath the surface? From this moment on, no one was safe. The investigation revealed that James Carter had recently been involved in a series of shadow transfers, a euphemism for discreet financial arrangements, exchanges that suggested a clandestine scheme to divert funds away from local businesses and into untraceable accounts. The operation was nicknamed Operation Hollow Ground by the investigators, a nod to the buried body, but also to the deeper secrets buried beneath the surface of Millersville. But there was one detail no one talked about. An old, crumpled letter found in Karen's possession, tucked into a hollowed-out book on her bookshelf. Its words hinted at coercion, threats, and a promise that what's buried stays buried. The handwriting was familiar, a faded cursive that matched notes from a long-forgotten family member. The letter suggested that James Carter had been involved in something dangerous, something that could ruin lives if exposed. But who had delivered the message, and why? It looked like coincidence, until they found the document, a secret ledger hidden in a false bottom of a vintage dresser in Michael's workshop, detailed notes on discreet transfers, private meetings, and safe locations. The ledger contained coded references to Operation Greenfield, a name that appeared repeatedly. The authorities realized it was an internal code used within a covert network, possibly linked to regional political figures or law enforcement officials sworn to silence. From that day, the city was never the same. Rumors spread of shadow transfers, clandestine meetings in motel parking lots near Arion 71, and whispers of a silent agreement that kept the town's darkest secrets hidden. The local sheriff's office, led by Sheriff Daniel Thompson, initiated a quiet investigation, but resistance was fierce. Witnesses who attempted to speak out faced intimidation. Those with knowledge disappeared from public view. But someone knew far more than they admitted. An anonymous tip led investigators to a series of security camera footage from a closed-down textile mill on the outskirts of town. Footage that showed figures in dark clothing moving clandestinely under cover of night, carrying what appeared to be small packages. The footage was shaky, blurry, but enough to confirm that covert operations were underway beyond the scope of a simple family feud. And this is where the plan started to fall apart. A betrayal within the ranks. A trusted informant turned whistleblower, an individual known only as Red, who claimed to have witnessed the entire scheme from the inside. Red's testimony revealed that the buried body was a cover-up, a distraction from a larger operation involving money laundering, extortion, and political influence. The quiet agreements that kept Millersville functioning were built on a foundation of lies and deception. This moment still sparks debates among experts watching the case unfold. Was it a crime of passion or a calculated act of manipulation? The authorities believed they had enough evidence to arrest Michael and Karen, but then came an unexpected twist. The disappearance of key witnesses, the sudden retirement of several officers, and a series of unexplained deaths among those who tried to dig deeper. The last page of this file changes everything, but you'll see it in a moment. They tried to hide this detail, but it was already too late. A ledger, a letter, a series of coded messages. These clues painted a picture of a community ensnared in a web of secrecy. The buried body was just the tip of the iceberg. Years later, forensic experts would analyze the soil samples from the garden, revealing traces of chemicals linked to clandestine operations, evidence that suggested the murder was not impulsive, but planned, deliberate. They didn't know someone was already watching, an unseen hand that monitored every move, every whisper, every attempt at disclosure. The quiet town of Millersville, once a symbol of Americana simplicity, had become a shadowy ground zero for corruption that stretched beyond its borders. The investigation was compromised from the start. Informants were silenced, evidence tampered with, and the true scope of the operation remained obscured. That call changed everything. A late-night call from an anonymous source tipped investigators to a hidden safe in the basement of the mill. Inside, they found documents detailing discreet transfers, coded communications, and a list of individuals involved in the scheme. Among them were names of local officials, law enforcement officers, and even a few well-known community leaders. Every name was linked to a network that operated quietly, away from the public eye. From this point, they had less than 24 hours before the entire operation could unravel. The authorities moved swiftly, arresting suspects, seizing records, but the cracks in the system were already visible. Some witnesses recanted, others vanished without a trace. It was then that everything began to spiral out of control, with rumors of a cover-up extending all the way to state officials. But the most interesting part of this story isn't even that. In the midst of the chaos, a child's drawing was found pinned to the fridge of a suburban home, an innocent sketch of a family, with a small figure buried beneath the earth. A chilling reminder that beneath the veneer of civility, innocence was often the first casualty of hidden agendas. They tried to hide the truth, but the evidence kept surfacing. A creased letter, a cryptic ledger, a shadowy figure lurking in grainy footage. These were the pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit neatly. What they uncovered was a portrait of a community betrayed from within, where loyalty was bought and silence was enforced through fear. Would you have trusted them? What would you have done then? The case remains unresolved. The buried body was merely a symptom of a deeper sickness, a town unwilling to confront its own darkness. The final, haunting question: was justice ever truly served, or was this just another chapter in a story too dangerous to be fully told? You've heard it now. You can't unhear it. What would you have done? Subscribe before this one disappears. The investigation into the Millersville case was officially closed in 2012, but the echoes of what transpired continue to resonate through the quiet streets and shadowed corners of the town. Official reports suggest that Michael Lawson and Karen Whitmore Lawson were charged with conspiracy and obstruction of justice, but were never convicted for the murder of James Carter. Their whereabouts remain unknown, and the case was quietly archived under sealed documents, accessible only through a classified government file. Yet, as with many secrets buried deep, some truths refuse to stay hidden. A series of anonymous tips over the following years hinted at a broader conspiracy, a network that extended well beyond Millersville, reaching into neighboring counties and even the corridors of state government. The ledger, the coded messages, the clandestine meetings, they all pointed to something far more systemic than a single family feud. Among the most chilling revelations was the discovery of a series of photographs taken covertly over a period of months, showing members of law enforcement and local officials in what appeared to be clandestine discussions. One image, in particular, drew attention: a shadowed figure passing a small package to another in a dimly lit motel parking lot just outside Columbus, Ohio. The package, according to sources, contained cash, an exchange of influence, a bribe, or perhaps something more sinister. Would you have trusted them? Could the very institutions meant to uphold justice be complicit in such a tangled web? The question lingers, unanswerable for many. What if the lines between law enforcement, political power, and organized crime blurred so completely that the truth became impossible to discern? In the aftermath, the town of Millersville experienced a quiet exodus of those who dared to question too loudly. The local sheriff's office, once the cornerstone of community safety, saw its ranks thinned as officers either retired early or transferred elsewhere, often citing personal reasons or health issues. The town's small police station, now largely dormant, still bears the faint scars of investigations that were abruptly halted. The narrative was carefully molded, the public given only fragments: an isolated murder, a family feud, a buried body. But behind closed doors, a different story unfolded. An internal memo, accidentally leaked years later, revealed a directive from an unlisted agency, coded simply as Operation Hollow Ground, to contain the fallout, to deflect attention from the deeper layers of corruption. And then, as if to confirm the suspicions of those who dared to look closer, a series of documents surfaced online. Copies of internal memos, incomplete and heavily redacted, hinting at a Project Silence. They contained references to discrete transfers, non-disclosure agreements, and internal safeguards, all designed to keep the truth hidden beneath a veneer of normalcy. What was it about Millersville that made it a perfect conduit for such a covert operation? One element stood out: the town's proximity to the old textile mill on the outskirts, an abandoned relic of American industry, now a haven for secret meetings and illicit exchanges. Local lore suggested the mill had been used for decades as a meeting point for shadowy dealings, its rusted machinery and darkened corridors hiding more than just dust and decay. But the most unsettling aspect was the silence. The community, once tight-knit, became fractured. Families divided by suspicion, neighbors wary of one another. Children grew up hearing whispers about the buried man, about the secret beneath the earth, without understanding the full scope. The town's charm, its innocence, was just a surface veneer concealing a deep rot. In the years since, investigators have continued to piece together fragments, but many questions remain unanswered. A recent review of the soil samples from the garden where Carter's body was found revealed traces of chemicals linked to clandestine operations, evidence that the burial site was carefully chosen, possibly with knowledge of the land's unusual composition or historical significance. Would you have trusted them then? When the authorities, the community, and even families like the Lawsons seemed to be hiding something, how could anyone be sure what the truth actually was? The line between victim and perpetrator blurred, and some began to wonder, was justice ever truly served, or was it simply postponed, buried beneath layers of carefully crafted lies? And then, there was the final piece, a discovery that challenged everything. A hidden recording, obtained through an anonymous source, captured the voice of an individual, an insider, talking about the last act and the final cover-up. The recording was faint, distorted, but one phrase stood out: "They're already planning to disappear the evidence." The implications were staggering. If the authorities or those involved in the operation were willing to erase evidence, to silence witnesses permanently, what else had they concealed? The recorded voice hinted at a systematic effort to destroy any traces that could unravel the web of influence and crime that had festered for decades. Would you have believed it then, or would you dismiss it as conspiracy? The truth, as always, lies somewhere in that murky space between fact and fiction. The more you look, the more it seems that some secrets are kept not just for protection, but for preservation. Preservation of power, reputation, and the fragile illusion of normalcy. The story of Millersville remains unresolved, a ghost story etched into the fabric of a town that once seemed idyllic. The buried body was just a symptom, an outward sign of a deeper, more insidious disease. The operation, Hollow Ground, was never fully dismantled. It merely went underground, waiting for the right moment, the right opportunity to surface again. What is most unsettling of all is the possibility that similar operations exist elsewhere, hidden in the shadows of other small towns, concealed behind layers of complacency and silence. The question is not whether these secrets will eventually come to light, but when. You've heard it now. You can't unhear it. What would you have done? Would you have dared to look deeper, to ask questions that others refused to answer? Or would you have turned away, content with the comforting lie of normalcy? Subscribe before this one disappears. Years have passed since the last official investigation into Millersville's dark secrets, yet whispers persist. Faint echoes carried on the wind, stories passed in hushed tones from one generation to the next. The buried body, the shadowy transactions, the silence that shrouded the town. These remain etched into the collective memory of those who dared to know. But truth is a fragile thing, easily fractured and often buried again beneath layers of deception. In the quiet outskirts of Millersville, near the remnants of the old textile mill, a new figure has begun to emerge. Someone who refuses to accept the official narrative. A researcher, an outsider, named Dr. Emily Carter, no relation to the victim, has dedicated herself to uncovering the truth. She arrived with a stack of old case files, faded photographs, and a relentless curiosity that borders on obsession. What she uncovered was disturbing. A series of anomalies in the land records suggesting that the burial site had been deliberately altered, reshaped, and concealed. An old map, unearthed from the town archives, revealed that the garden where James Carter's body was found had once been part of a larger property, one owned by a now-defunct corporation linked to regional political figures. The soil tests she commissioned showed traces of chemicals not naturally occurring in the area, a sign that the ground had been intentionally treated or contaminated. Would you have trusted her? When official channels had already failed and the town's silence had become deafening, would an outsider's investigation be enough to crack the case? Or was this just another dead end, another ghost trying to claw its way out of the past? The more Emily dug, the more she realized that the buried truth was only the surface of something far more complex. A clandestine network had operated quietly for decades, an intricate web of influence, coercion, and veiled transactions that extended beyond Millersville into nearby counties and perhaps state government. The ledger, the coded communications, the photographs, they all pointed to a systematic effort to control, to manipulate, and to conceal. One night, Emily received an anonymous message, an encrypted email that contained a single sentence. The real operation is still running. Look beneath the old mill. Without hesitation, she traveled to the site, flashlight in, hand, under the cover of darkness. The mill's rusted carcass loomed ahead, silent and foreboding, its shadow stretching across the muddy ground. Inside, the decaying machinery and broken windows provided cover for something unexpected. A narrow, concealed passage, an underground tunnel, faintly discernible beneath layers of debris. It was a remnant of the mill's original construction, long forgotten by the townspeople. She hesitated only briefly before descending into the darkness, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. What she found down there was chilling. The tunnel led to a hidden chamber, an underground room lined with monitors, radio equipment, and stacks of documents. It was a command center, operating covertly beneath the town's nose. The monitors flickered in the gloom, displaying live feeds from remote cameras scattered across Millersville and beyond. Among the files, she discovered a folder labeled Project Silence, containing internal memos, security logs, and lists of individuals involved in the operation, names she recognized from the town's history, law enforcement, and local politics. The documents revealed a pattern, a continuous effort to monitor, manipulate, and erase evidence whenever the truth threatened to surface. Would you have believed it then? That this small, quiet town was a hub for a covert operation spanning decades? Or would you dismiss it as paranoia, a conspiracy too elaborate to be true? The evidence was there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to connect the dots. As Emily examined the documents, she uncovered references to the Greenfield Protocol, a set of clandestine procedures designed to contain scandals, eliminate witnesses, and maintain a carefully crafted illusion of normalcy. It explained how the buried body was just a pawn in a larger game, an act to divert attention from something much darker, something that involved multiple layers of complicity. But even more, Disturbing was a series of photographs, images of the underground chamber taken from a hidden camera. In one, a figure in a dark coat and mask was seen moving across the room, placing an object into a sealed safe. An evidence locker, perhaps, or a storage for something more sinister. The face was obscured, but the body language suggested familiarity. An insider, someone who knew the operation intimately. This discovery led Emily to a startling realization. The operation was ongoing. Bah Underground Command Center was still active, still connected to the machinery of silence that had shielded Millersville for so long. The truth was not buried. It had merely gone deeper. Underground, waiting for someone to unearth it anew. Her next move was risky. She contacted a trusted journalist, a veteran reporter named David Monroe, known for challenging authority and exposing corruption. Together, they planned to reveal what they had found, an expose that could shatter the fragile veneer of Millersville's innocence. But as they prepared to go public, an anonymous warning arrived. Stop digging, or you'll regret it. The message was ominous, coded with a warning that the operation's reach extended far beyond the town. Who was watching? What were they willing to do to keep the secret buried? The night before their planned release, Emily's home was broken into. Nothing stolen, but the message scrawled across her wall in black marker, "Some truths are better left in the dark." The incident was dismissed as a break-in, but Emily knew better. They had been warned. From that moment, the stakes escalated. Evidence was destroyed, files went missing, and trusted allies suddenly withdrew their support. The operation's defenders, those who benefited from the silence, had begun to tighten their grip. They knew that the truth, if fully revealed, could topple political careers, ruin reputations, and dismantle a carefully maintained network. And this is where the story reaches its most unsettling point. The final piece of the puzzle emerged from an audio recording, an accidental capture of a conversation in a dimly lit office revealing a plan to disappear key witnesses and close the chapter once and for all. The voices spoke in coded language, but the meaning was clear. They intended to erase anyone who threatened to expose the operation. Would you have trusted them then? When even the investigators who once looked into the case had become silent, when the Ashab community's trust had been eroded into suspicion, the truth had become a weapon, used and abused to protect the powerful, to silence the innocent. You've heard it now. You can't unhear it. The buried body was not just a tragic accident or a family feud. It was a symptom, a piece of a larger puzzle that stretches across the fabric of American small-town life. The question remains, how many other secrets lie hidden beneath the surface, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover them? And what is truly buried beneath the earth? The answer is as elusive as the truth itself. But one thing is certain. The shadows cast by Millersville's dark history continue to stretch far beyond its borders. The operation may have gone underground, but its echoes persist, whispering in the silence. What would you have done then? Would you have continued to look, to question, to challenge the darkness? Or would you have accepted the veneer of normalcy, content with the illusion that some truths are better? Left buried? You've heard it now. You can't unhear it. Subscribe before the silence becomes permanent.